The results are in. Brandon Johnson is officially the new mayor of Chicago, defeating Paul Vallas by a thin margin last week. And as the city braces for change to come with this new administration, so does the real estate market. Today, we're going to talk about the Bring Chicago Home proposal, or as you may know it, the mansion tax. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Matt Thomas with Baird & Warner Real Estate. I help buyers, sellers, investors, and tenants here in Chicago every single day. If I can help you in your home buying journey here in Chicago or anywhere else in the United States, please don't hesitate to reach out. Use the links in the description below to get in contact with my team today. Let's just start by saying this is not meant to be a political video. I'm not here to argue red versus blue, and if you are, please don't do that in the comments. There are plenty of places to have your political outlet. Instead, we are going to have a functional conversation about what the mansion tax actually is. It's dominating the real estate news cycle, as in real estate agents, brokerages, CAR, the Chicago Association of Realtors. We've all been bracing for the results of this election. And the reason being, there was a pretty clear delineation between the candidates on who supported this incoming mansion tax and who didn't. Now we're here. We know that Brandon Johnson is taking over as mayor of Chicago. We also know that he's a strong supporter of this plan. So today, the goal is to break down the mansion tax. What is it? Where did it come from? And why are people for or against it? Let's start with the most obvious question. What is the Bring Chicago Home initiative, or the mansion tax? The core of this proposal is ending homelessness in Chicago. And the idea is we're going to set up a new solely funded revenue stream using a 2.65% transfer tax on luxury properties over $1 million in Chicago. This is a significant change. Today in Chicago, the transfer tax on a property of $1 million is 0.75%. So you'd pay roughly $7,500. This initiative would obviously increase that transfer tax to 2.65%, bringing the new total to $26,500. That's a steep increase, $19,000 on this $1 million base property in the example for the home buyer. The revenue created by this tax will then be driven right back to the city and solving the homelessness problem. This will be in rental subsidies, it could be in services for homeless, it could be in permanent housing. Whatever it is, the money generated from this revenue will go directly back towards that cause. According to the proposal's website, if we were to enact this change, we'd be driving roughly $165 million annually to solving the homelessness issue. So it's hard to argue that there would be an immediate impact on that front, assuming these funds are dedicated in the right way. This initiative is supported by a coalition of service providers, politicians, including Brandon Johnson and his team, all of whom believe it will help solve the homelessness problem and alleviate the tension that we have with a lack of affordable housing in Chicago. In Brandon Johnson's own words, this proposal is a small price to pay for the tremendous impact that it can have on the city. Now, Chicago isn't the first major city to implement some sort of mansion or high-end tax. In New York City, the current mansion tax starts at $1 million and a 1% transfer tax, and it scales gradually from there to 3.9% on transactions over $25 million. And they've been using this system since 2019. Los Angeles also just rolled out their own transfer tax initiative, which went live April 1st of this year. They're adding an additional 4% tax on top of properties that are transacting over $5 million, and they're adding an additional 5.5% for properties that transact over $10 million. The LA tax is a little too immediate to track, although I will say that real estate agents are already talking about a number of listings hitting the market to try and beat the transfer tax. We saw that in New York in 2019 as well. The highest end of the market rushed to try and take things live, thinking that they might lose their buyer pool once the tax goes into effect. And frankly speaking, New York proved that that was the case. In 2019, luxury sales dropped dramatically after the transfer tax went into effect. Long term, there's been some correction back to a more normal market from there, but the immediate effect you really can't ignore. As soon as you start taxing the top or the high end of the marketplace, you directly impact incentive for those types of buyers to come into the community. Critics of this plan think it's really going to discourage investment in Chicago, and they would argue that in many cases that $1 million price point isn't a luxury mansion anymore. And it could be something like a multi-unit with several rentals that would be rented at affordable rates to the community. But if you're now slapping that buyer with an additional almost $20,000 in transfer fees, it's highly unlikely that they're going to be able to turn that unit around or units around and rent them out at an affordable cost to consumers because they're out of pocket so much money. Others say that this is already a city that is taxed beyond belief. We have some of the highest property taxes in the country. We have some of the highest transfer taxes before this enactment in the country. So Chicagoans get hit in all ways when it comes to taxes. And their argument is if we continue to levy the steepness of those taxes, particularly in the luxury market, which is already depressed, it's down about 35% from this time last year. This seems to be a potential deal breaker. People are already struggling to justify the cost of these homes or making purchase decisions, and now we're going to add on an extreme transfer tax on top. It will have direct implications on the buyer pool for $1 million plus in Chicago. But proponents argue that this is a huge step forward and that homelessness in Chicago was a major problem before COVID. It has only been exacerbated by COVID and by some of the lockdown policies that went into effect. And this revenue stream will directly drive change. It will make it so that Chicago can start to become a city of affordable housing for all. They also argued that only 4% of Chicagoland properties meet the requirement to be taxed. The other 96% are sub-$1 million sales. They won't face any changes to their transfer taxes. They'll be relatively unaffected by this proposal. So what do you think? Is the mansion tax right for Chicago? Is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you have to say. If you want more information on the Bring Chicago Home proposal, if you'd like to read it yourself and make sure that you understand it in full, I'll make sure I include a link in the description so that you can check that out. Thank you for watching. Take care.